When pediatric nurse Maya Chen injected her final vial of insulin into a collapsed stranger outside Chicago General, she had exactly 18 hours before her own diabetic coma would begin. 24 hours later, a private jet touched down in her grandmother's backyard garden. The 6:47 a.m. L train rattles through Chicago's South Side as Maya Chen checks her glucose monitor for the third time in 20 minutes. The digital display reads 92 mg/dl, stable, but she knows the precarious dance of type 1 diabetes means this number could plummet or spike without warning. At 26, she's been managing this condition for 18 years, ever since her body stopped producing insulin in second grade. Maya's reflection in the train window shows tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, her black hair pulled into the same practical ponytail she's worn since nursing school. Her scrubs are clean but faded from countless hospital laundry cycles, and her worn Nikes have walked thousands of miles through pediatric ward hallways. She carries everything she owns in a second-hand messenger bag: her stethoscope, a romance novel with a cracked spine, an apple from the corner bodega, and most importantly, her insulin pen loaded with her last dose of Humalog. The train lurches to a stop at her station. Maya climbs the stairs from the underground platform, emerging into a crisp October morning where the smell of roasting coffee beans from the nearby factory mingles with exhaust fumes. She waves to Mrs. Patterson, who's already arranging flowers outside her corner shop, and buys a newspaper from the same vendor she's greeted for 3 years. These small rituals anchor her day, providing stability in a life that often feels like walking a tightrope. Chicago General Hospital looms ahead, a fortress of glass and concrete where Maya has worked for 4 years as a pediatric nurse. She badges in through the employee entrance, passing the security guard who calls her Sunshine because she always smiles despite working double shifts to pay for her grandmother's assisted living facility. The elevator carries her to the 7th floor, where cartoon murals of smiling animals attempt to soften the reality of childhood illness. Maya's morning routine is methodical. She counts insulin vials in the medication room. Hospital policy requires 2 nurses to verify controlled substances. There are 12 vials of pediatric-strength insulin in the refrigerated cabinet, enough for her young patients, but not enough for her personal emergency stash. Her own prescription ran out yesterday, and her next pharmacy pickup isn't until this afternoon. She's rationing her final dose, planning to make it stretch until lunch break. Her first patient is Tommy Rodriguez, age 7, newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. His parents sit beside his bed, faces etched with the same fear Maya remembers seeing in her own parents' eyes years ago. She demonstrates how to draw insulin into a syringe, her movements precise and confident. "It's going to be okay," she tells Tommy's mother, meaning it. "You learn to live with it. Some days you hardly think about it at all." But even as Maya comforts others, she calculates hours in her head. Without insulin, her blood sugar will begin climbing within 6 hours. By tonight, she'll be nauseated and exhausted. By tomorrow morning, diabetic ketoacidosis could begin, a potentially fatal condition where her body starts breaking down fat for energy, producing toxic ketones. She's seen it happen to patients who couldn't afford their medication or forgot doses during illness. The morning passes in its familiar rhythm. Maya checks blood sugars, administers medications, comforts crying children, and teaches worried parents. She loves this work, finding purpose in these small acts of healing and education. During her break, she calls 3 pharmacies trying to find a cheaper insulin option. But even generic versions cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Her insurance doesn't reset until next month, and she's already borrowed money from her credit card to cover her grandmother's medical bills. At 11:30 a.m., Maya's glucose monitor beeps. Her blood sugar has dropped to 68 mg/dl, not dangerous yet, but trending downward. She eats her apple and a packet of crackers from the nurse's break room, knowing these carbohydrates will provide temporary relief but not address the underlying problem. Her body needs insulin to properly process glucose, and she's running out of time. The irony isn't lost on her. She's surrounded by insulin, professionally trusted to administer life-saving medication to children, yet she can't afford enough for herself. American healthcare's cruel mathematics. A vial of insulin that costs $3 to manufacture sell for over $300. Maya makes decent money as a nurse, but between her grandmother's care costs, student loans, and Chicago rent, there's rarely anything left for medical emergencies. As her shift approaches lunch break, Maya touches the insulin pen in her pocket. 1 dose left. She's calculated she can skip it until tonight if she's careful about her diet, then use it before bed to prevent overnight complications. It's risky, but she's done this before during tight financial periods. Sometimes being diabetic means making impossible choices between medication and other necessities. Outside the hospital windows, Chicago bustles with ordinary Thursday energy. People rush to lunch meetings, construction workers take their break, and life moves forward in its predictable patterns. Maya checks her watch. 11:47 a.m. In less than an hour, her carefully ordered world will shatter, and she'll face a choice that will change everything. Maya steps out of Chicago General's main entrance for her lunch break, still calculating insulin timing in her head, when she hears the screech of brakes followed by shouting voices. Across the street, a delivery truck has stopped at an awkward angle, its driver standing beside the open door and gesturing frantically at something on the sidewalk. "Call 911, the driver yells. "Someone collapsed!" Maya's nursing instincts override her lunch plans. She jogs across the intersection, her messenger bag bouncing against her hip, and finds a crowd gathering around a man lying motionless on the concrete. He appears to be in his 50s, well-dressed in a charcoal suit that probably costs more than Maya's monthly salary. But his expensive clothes can't hide the medical emergency unfolding. His skin is pale and clammy, his breathing rapid and shallow. A briefcase lies open beside him, papers scattered by the October wind. "I'm a nurse," Maya announces, kneeling beside him. She immediately begins her assessment, checking his pulse, weak and rapid, and looking for obvious injuries. No blood, no signs of trauma from a fall. His pupils are responsive but sluggish, and when she speaks to him, he mumbles incoherently. A woman in a business suit hovers nearby, clutching her phone. "I called 911, she says. "The ambulance is coming." Maya continues her examination, and that's when she sees it. A medical alert bracelet around the man's wrist. The metal tag reads Type 1 diabetes, along with an emergency contact number. Her heart sinks as she recognizes the signs. This isn't a heart attack or stroke. This is severe hypoglycemia, dangerously low blood sugar that can cause seizures, coma, or death if not treated immediately. "Does anyone have candy or juice?" Maya calls to the crowd. Several people offer mints and gum, but she needs something more substantial. The man's blood sugar has dropped so low that he's losing consciousness. In a hospital, she'd administer IV glucose or inject glucagon, but she has neither on the street. The distant sound of sirens grows closer, but Maya knows from experience that Chicago traffic can delay ambulances, especially during lunch hour. She checks her watch. Response time is already at 8 minutes and counting. The man's breathing becomes more labored, and his skin takes on a grayish tinge that Maya recognizes as a sign of impending crisis. Then she remembers. Insulin works in reverse for severe hypoglycemia. If someone has injected too much insulin, causing dangerous low blood sugar, sometimes a small amount of additional insulin can paradoxically help stabilize the system, but only in very specific circumstances, and it's an extremely risky intervention that goes against standard protocol. Maya's hand moves to her pocket, feeling the insulin pen that contains her last dose. Her medical training wars with an unconventional treatment option she's read about in case studies, but never attempted. The standard protocol would be to wait for the paramedics with proper glucose treatments, but this man is deteriorating rapidly. She pulls out her phone and calls the hospital's emergency physician. "Dr. Martinez, it's Maya from PEDS. I have a diabetic emergency on the street. Severe hypoglycemia. Patient is barely conscious. ETA on the ambulance is unknown. I have insulin with me. Should I? Absolutely not, Dr. Martinez interrupts. Do not administer insulin to a hypoglycemic patient. That's the opposite of treatment. Wait for the paramedics. But as Maya hangs up, the man's eyes roll back and his body begins to convulse. The crowd gasps and steps backward. Maya has seen diabetic seizures before, and she knows this patient has minutes, not the 15 or 20 it might take for properly equipped paramedics to arrive and establish IV access. She pulls out her glucose monitor and quickly tests the man's blood sugar using a test strip. The reading is so low it barely registers. 23 mg/dl. Normal range is 80, 120. At this level, brain damage becomes a real possibility. Maya's hands shake as she holds her insulin pen. Everything in her training says this is wrong, dangerous, potentially fatal. But she's also read about paradoxical insulin therapy in extreme cases where microdoses can help reset the body's glucose regulation in insulin-dependent diabetics experiencing severe reactions. It's experimental, rarely used, and definitely not something a nurse should attempt without physician oversight. The man's convulsions intensify. His lips are turning blue from lack of oxygen, and Maya can see that his brain is shutting down from glucose starvation. The crowd grows larger, people filming with their phones, everyone waiting for professional help that may arrive too late. Maya makes her decision. She removes the cap from her insulin pen, her last dose, the medication she needs to survive the next 18 hours, and draws a tiny amount into the chamber. Not a full therapeutic dose, but a fraction of what she would normally inject. Her hands are steady now, muscle memory from thousands of injections overriding her fear. "What are you doing?" asks a bystander. "That's not—" "I'm a nurse," Maya says firmly, finding a clear spot on the man's arm. She pierces his skin with the needle and injects the insulin, then immediately begins chest compressions to help circulate whatever glucose remains in his system. For 30 seconds, nothing changes. The man continues seizing, his body rigid with medical crisis. Maya performs rescue breathing, tilting his head back and forcing air into his lungs. The crowd falls silent except for the approaching sirens, everyone holding their breath. Then, gradually, the seizure subsides. The man's breathing becomes less labored, his color improves slightly, and his eyes flutter open. He's conscious but confused, looking around at the faces surrounding him as if awakening from a dream. "Sir, can you hear me?" Maya asks. "You're okay. You had a diabetic episode, but you're going to be fine." Just as the paramedics arrive, the man grips Maya's hand weakly and whispers, "Thank you." She's saved his life. But as she watches the ambulance crew take over his care, Maya realizes she may have sacrificed her own. The paramedics load the unnamed man into the ambulance, and Maya watches it disappear into Chicago traffic with a mixture of relief and growing dread. Her insulin pen lies empty in her palm, the plastic device suddenly feeling as heavy as a stone. She's just used her last dose, the medication she needed to survive the next 18 hours, on a stranger whose name she doesn't even know. Maya checks her glucose monitor. 94 mg/dl. Still normal, but without insulin, her blood sugar will begin climbing within hours. Type 1 diabetics don't produce insulin naturally, so every carbohydrate she consumes will push her numbers higher with no way to bring them down. By tonight, she'll be sick. By tomorrow, she could be in diabetic ketoacidosis, the same life-threatening condition she just prevented in another person. The crowd disperses, people returning to their lunch plans and afternoon appointments. Maya stands alone on the sidewalk where minutes ago she held a man's life in her hands. Papers from his scattered briefcase blow past her feet, corporate letterhead with names of companies she doesn't recognize, financial documents with numbers that have more zeros than her annual salary. Her phone buzzes with a text from the hospital. "Where are you? Your shift started 5 minutes ago." Maya hurries back across the street, her mind racing with the implications of what she's done. She can't tell anyone at work about the insulin. Administering medication outside of hospital protocol, especially to a non-patient, could result in disciplinary action or worse. Nurses have lost their licenses for less. The afternoon passes in a blur of routine tasks that feel surreal after the morning's crisis. Maya checks on her young patients, administers their medications, and teaches anxious parents about glucose monitoring, all while acutely aware of her own glucose levels beginning to rise. By 3 p.m., her monitor reads 156 mg/dL, higher than normal but not yet dangerous. She drinks water and avoids the vending machines, trying to minimize carbohydrate intake. At 4 p.m., her charge nurse, Patricia Wong, approaches Maya's station with a serious expression. Patricia has been a nurse for 20 years and has a reputation for running a tight ship, but she's always been fair to Maya. "I need to speak with you privately," Patricia says, gesturing toward the break room. Maya's heart pounds as she follows Patricia, wondering if somehow word has gotten out about the street incident. They sit across from each other at the small table where Maya usually eats her lunch, but the familiar space now feels like an interrogation room. "I received a call from Dr. Martinez about an hour ago," Patricia begins. "He said you contacted him about administering insulin to a hypoglycemic patient outside the hospital. He wanted to make sure you didn't actually do anything medically inappropriate." The words hang in the air between them. Maya knows she could lie, could claim she followed protocol and waited for the paramedics. But she's never been good at deception, and Patricia's knowing look suggests she already suspects the truth. "The patient was seizing," Maya says quietly. "His blood sugar was 23, the ambulance was delayed, and he was dying." Patricia closes her eyes briefly as if processing information she hoped not to hear. "Maya, please tell me you didn't administer medication to a non-patient without physician authorization." The silence stretches for several heartbeats. Maya thinks about Tommy Rodriguez and her other young patients who depend on her, about her grandmother who needs the income from Maya's job, about her own precarious financial situation that led to this moment in the first place. "I saved his life," Maya says finally. Patricia's shoulders sag. "Oh, Maya, you know I have to report this. Hospital policy is clear about medication administration outside of our protocols. Even if your intentions were good, you violated multiple regulations." "I understand," Maya says, though she doesn't really understand how saving someone's life could be wrong. Patricia stands up, looking genuinely pained. "I have to suspend you pending an investigation. You'll need to surrender your badge and be escorted out. The hospital's liability insurance requires it any time there's a potential medication error, even if it occurred off-property." The next hour passes in a haze of bureaucratic procedures. Maya cleans out her locker, collecting her few personal items while a security guard waits nearby. Her co-workers watch with curiosity and concern, whispering among themselves about what could have happened to get reliable Maya Chen in trouble. As Maya walks through the hospital lobby for what might be the last time, she passes the gift shop where she sometimes buys cards for patients' birthdays. The irony strikes her. She's being punished for the same compassion that makes her a good nurse. The system that employs her to save lives is now threatening to end her career because she saved a life in the wrong location, in the wrong way. Outside, the October sun feels too bright after the fluorescent hospital lighting. Maya's glucose monitor beeps, 187 mg/dL and climbing. She has no job, no insulin, and approximately 12 hours before her body begins shutting down from lack of medication. She pulls out her phone to call her grandmother, dreading the conversation. How do you explain that you've lost your job for being too caring? How do you tell the woman who raised you that you might have made a terrible mistake? As she dials the number, Maya notices something odd. Across the street, a man in an expensive suit is taking photos of her with a professional camera. When their eyes meet, he quickly looks away and pretends to be photographing the hospital building. Maya feels a chill that has nothing to do with the autumn air. The consequences of her choice are just beginning to unfold. Maya's studio apartment feels smaller than usual as she sits at her second-hand kitchen table, staring at the formal letter that arrived by courier at 8 a.m. The Chicago Board of Nursing letterhead makes her stomach clench before she even reads the contents. The words blur together as her blood sugar continues climbing. 201 mg/dL on her latest reading. But the legal terminology is clear enough. Formal investigation, potential license revocation, hearing scheduled for next week. Her phone has been ringing constantly since yesterday. First, it was Patricia from the hospital calling to check on her and express regret about the suspension. Then Dr. Martinez awkwardly apologizing for having to report the incident while emphasizing he had no choice under hospital policy. But the calls that worry Maya most came from numbers she doesn't recognize. Reporters, somehow having gotten her personal information, wanting to interview her about the nurse who broke protocol. Maya's laptop sits open on the table, displaying search results that make her feel sick. Someone recorded video of the street incident, and it's already been shared thousands of times on social media. The shaky phone footage shows her kneeling beside the collapsed man, but the angle makes it impossible to see what she's actually doing. The comments section is a battlefield of opinions. Nurse hero saves dying man when system fails. Reckless medical practice. She could have killed him. Why didn't she wait for proper medical help? This is what's wrong with healthcare. Too many rules, not enough compassion. The Chicago Tribune's health reporter, Jennifer Martinez, has written a piece titled, "When Compassion Conflicts with Protocol, A Nurse's Dilemma." It's surprisingly sympathetic to Maya's situation, but it also includes quotes from medical professionals criticizing her decision. Dr. Robert Steinberg from Northwestern Memorial is quoted saying, "While we understand the impulse to help, administering medication outside of established protocols endangers patients and exposes healthcare workers to significant liability." Maya's glucose monitor beeps again. 223 mg/dL. She's now in the danger zone, and her body is beginning to show signs of insulin deficiency. She's nauseated, constantly thirsty, and has developed the fruity breath odor that indicates her body is starting to break down fat for energy. The beginning stages of diabetic ketoacidosis. She's called 4 pharmacies this morning, begging for an emergency insulin supply. But without an active prescription and with her insurance in limbo due to the job suspension, the cost is astronomical. The pharmacist at Walgreens quoted her $380 for a single vial of Humalog, money she simply doesn't have. Her credit cards are maxed out from her grandmother's medical expenses, and her savings account contains exactly $127. The irony is devastating. Maya has spent 4 years administering insulin to diabetic children, teaching their families about blood sugar management and advocating for better pharmaceutical access. Now she's experiencing firsthand the cruel mathematics of American healthcare. Insulin costs more than rent, and insurance only covers medication if you're employed and in good standing. At 10:30 a.m., there's a knock at her door. Maya checks the peephole and sees a woman in a business suit holding a briefcase and a tablet computer. She looks official, possibly another reporter, or maybe someone from the nursing board's investigation team. "Miss Chen, I'm Sarah Richardson from the law firm Hartwell, Gibbs & Associates. I'd like to speak with you about your case." Maya opens the door but keeps the chain latch engaged. "I don't have money for a lawyer." Sarah Richardson smiles professionally. "I'm not here to charge you for legal services. May I come in? I have some information that might interest you regarding the man you helped yesterday." Against her better judgment, Maya lets the lawyer into her small apartment. Richardson's eyes take in the modest surroundings. The futon that doubles as Maya's bed, the single kitchen chair, the stack of medical bills on the counter next to empty insulin vials. "The man you assisted yesterday is named William Blackstone," Richardson says, settling into the kitchen chair. "He's the CEO of Blackstone Pharmaceutical Industries." Maya stares at her. "The insulin manufacturer?" Among other medications, yes. Mr. Blackstone specifically asked me to locate you and extend his gratitude. He's very much alive because of your quick thinking, and he's aware of the professional consequences you're facing. Richardson opens her briefcase and pulls out a tablet, showing Maya a photograph of the man from yesterday, now conscious and sitting up in a hospital bed. He looks healthier, but still somewhat weak, surrounded by what appear to be family members. Mr. Blackstone had accidentally double-dosed his insulin that morning, Richardson continues. A simple mistake. He was distracted by an important phone call and forgot he'd already injected. By the time he collapsed, his blood sugar had dropped to life-threatening levels. The paramedics said if you hadn't intervened, he would have suffered permanent brain damage or death. Maya feels a mix of vindication and continued worry. That doesn't change the fact that I violated protocol. The nursing board doesn't care about outcomes. They care about following rules. Richardson nods gravely. Mr. Blackstone is aware of your situation. He's also aware that his company's insulin pricing has made it difficult for people like you to afford life-saving medication. The irony of his situation isn't lost on him. She pulls a folder from her briefcase. He's asked me to provide you with legal representation for your nursing board hearing, at no cost to you. Additionally, he'd like to ensure you have access to the insulin you need during this difficult time. Richardson slides a pharmacy card across the table. This will cover your medication costs indefinitely. Mr. Blackstone considers it a small gesture given what you've done for him. Maya stares at the card, her hands trembling slightly from high blood sugar. The offer feels too good to be true, but her glucose monitor reading of 241 mg/dL reminds her that she's running out of time and options. What does he want in return? Maya asks. Richardson's expression becomes carefully neutral. He'd like to meet with you personally. There's something he wants to discuss, a way you might help him address some of the problems you've experienced firsthand. Outside Maya's apartment window, Chicago continues its daily rhythm, unaware that the choices made in the next few hours might change everything. The penthouse office of Blackstone Pharmaceutical Industries occupies the entire top floor of a gleaming downtown Chicago tower, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Lake Michigan. Maya stands in the reception area, feeling out of place in her best dress, a simple navy blue outfit she bought for nursing school interviews 4 years ago. Her blood sugar has stabilized at 156 mg/dL thanks to the pharmacy card Richardson provided, but she still feels shaky from the stress of the past 48 hours. William Blackstone emerges from his office looking remarkably better than he did 2 days ago on the sidewalk. He's in his early 50s with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that comes from decades of corporate leadership. But Maya notices the medical alert bracelet still on his wrist, and there's a vulnerability in his eyes that wasn't visible in the company promotional photos she researched before coming here. "Miss Chen," he says, extending his hand, "I owe you my life." His office is larger than Maya's entire apartment, furnished with antiques and original artwork that probably cost more than she makes in a year. But what catches her attention is a small framed photo on his desk. Blackstone with a young girl, maybe 8 years old, both of them smiling at a beach somewhere. "My daughter Emma," Blackstone says, noticing Maya's gaze. "She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 6. That's actually how I ended up in the pharmaceutical industry. I wanted to understand the science behind the condition that threatened her life." He gestures for Maya to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Emma's 22 now, studying biochemistry at Northwestern. She wants to develop better diabetes treatments. The irony is that she can't afford the insulin my own company produces without the family discount. Maya shifts uncomfortably. "Mr. Blackstone, I appreciate the legal help and the medication assistance, but I'm not sure why I'm here." Blackstone leans back in his chair, his expression growing serious. "Because you did something 2 days ago that I've been trying to figure out how to do for years. You put a human life ahead of institutional protocol. You risked your career, your health, and your financial security to save a stranger. He pulls out a tablet and shows Maya a news article. The headline reads, "Pharmaceutical CEO saved by nurse who couldn't afford his company's insulin." The story has been picked up by national media, and the comments section is filled with outrage about insulin pricing and healthcare inequity. This story has generated more attention to the insulin affordability crisis than any congressional hearing or a regulatory proposal, Blackstone continues. People are finally paying attention to the impossible choices diabetics face every day. Maya feels a chill of recognition. "You're using me as a publicity stunt." "No," Blackstone says firmly, "I'm offering you a platform. You've experienced the system from both sides, as a healthcare provider and as a patient who can't afford treatment. You understand the medical science and the human cost of our current approach to pharmaceutical pricing." He turns to his computer and pulls up a presentation slide. Blackstone Pharmaceutical currently spends $2.3 billion annually on research and development, $1.8 billion on marketing, and $4.1 billion on shareholder dividends. Our insulin manufacturing costs are approximately $12 per vial, which we sell for $340. The numbers make Maya's stomach turn. She's seen families choose between insulin and rent, watched parents water down their children's medication to make it last longer, and known patients who've died from rationing doses they couldn't afford. "I've been trying to change this system from inside the industry," Blackstone continues, "but pharmaceutical companies are publicly traded entities with fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders. Every decision gets filtered through profit maximization models." He stands and walks to the window, looking out at the city below. 2 days ago, lying on that sidewalk, I realized something. The system isn't going to change through corporate boardrooms or government regulations. It's going to change because people like you, healthcare workers who see the human cost every day, demand better. Blackstone turns back to Maya. "I'm announcing a new foundation tomorrow, the Maya Chen Foundation for Healthcare Equity. Its mission will be to provide free insulin to diabetics who can't afford it, fund research into cheaper production methods, and advocate for pharmaceutical pricing reform." Maya stares at him. "You're naming a foundation after me?" "With your permission, and I'd like you to run it. Full salary, benefits, and a platform to address the problems you've experienced firsthand. You'd work with physicians, researchers, patient advocates, and policymakers to develop sustainable solutions to medication affordability." The offer is overwhelming. Maya thinks about her suspension from the hospital, the nursing board investigation, the uncertainty about her career. Running a foundation would give her purpose and financial security. But it would also mean becoming a public figure in a healthcare debate she's not sure she's qualified to lead. "What about the nursing board hearing?" Maya asks. "My legal team will handle that. We have evidence that your intervention was medically appropriate and life-saving. More importantly, we have a compelling narrative about a nurse who risked everything to save a life. Public opinion is on your side." Blackstone returns to his desk and pulls out a folder. "The foundation's initial funding will be $50 million. That's enough to provide free insulin to approximately 4,000 diabetics for 1 year, while also funding research into alternative production methods." Maya's mind reels with the possibilities. $50 million could change thousands of lives, could prevent other diabetics from facing the same impossible choice she confronted 2 days ago. But something about the offer feels too convenient, too perfect. "Why me?" she asks. "You could hire experienced pharmaceutical executives, healthcare policy experts, people with advanced degrees and years of experience." Blackstone's expression softens. "Because 2 days ago, when faced with an impossible choice, you chose to save a life. You didn't calculate the risks or consider the consequences. You saw someone dying and acted with pure compassion. That's the kind of person I want leading this foundation." He slides a contract across the desk. "You don't have to decide today. Take the documents home, think about it, talk to people you trust. But I hope you'll consider it. you have an opportunity to turn your personal crisis into systemic change. Maya picks up the contract, its weight feeling heavier than the legal papers for her nursing board hearing. Outside the window, Chicago spreads out below them, millions of people navigating their own healthcare challenges, making their own impossible choices between medication and financial survival. "I'll think about it," Maya says, though she already knows what her answer will be. As she leaves the building, Maya realizes that in 48 hours she's gone from potentially losing everything to being offered a chance to change the system that nearly killed her. The irony isn't lost on her. Sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as the worst disasters. The Chicago Board of Nursing hearing room feels like a courtroom, complete with a long table where 3 stern-faced board members sit reviewing Maya's case file. The morning sun streams through tall windows, but the formal atmosphere makes the space feel cold and unwelcoming. Maya sits beside Sarah Richardson, her hands folded in her lap, trying to project confidence she doesn't feel. Board Chair Dr. Margaret Henley, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, calls the hearing to order. "We're here to review the case of Maya Chen, RN, regarding allegations of inappropriate medication administration outside of hospital protocol. Ms. Chen, you are accused of administering insulin to a non-patient without physician authorization, in violation of the Illinois Nursing Practice Act." Richardson stands to present Maya's defense. She's prepared meticulously, with medical expert testimony supporting Maya's intervention, character references from colleagues, and documentation of the patient's positive outcome. The legal argument is solid. Maya's actions were medically appropriate and life-saving. "Members of the board," Richardson begins, "Ms. Chen encountered a medical emergency that required immediate intervention. The patient, Mr. William Blackstone, was experiencing severe hypoglycemia with a blood glucose level of 23 mg/dl, accompanied by seizures that indicated imminent brain damage or death. Standard emergency protocols were insufficient given the delayed response time of paramedic services." Richardson presents the medical evidence systematically. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, an emergency medicine physician from Northwestern Memorial, testifies via video conference that Maya's microdose insulin intervention, while unconventional, was medically sound for the specific circumstances. Patient advocacy groups have submitted letters supporting Maya's compassionate response to a healthcare emergency. But as Richardson presents her case, Maya notices the board members' expressions growing increasingly skeptical. Dr. Henley interrupts several times to clarify points about nursing scope of practice, and board member Dr. Samuel Torres repeatedly emphasizes the importance of following established protocols regardless of circumstances. "Ms. Richardson," Dr. Torres says during a break in testimony, "while we appreciate the positive outcome in this case, nursing practice is governed by clear regulations designed to protect both patients and practitioners. Nurses cannot simply decide to deviate from established protocols based on their individual judgment." The hearing takes a turn for the worse when the board calls their own expert witness, Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, a nursing education specialist who has spent 30 years developing professional standards. Dr. Yamamoto's testimony is devastating to Maya's case. "While I understand the emotional appeal of Ms. Chen's actions," Dr. Yamamoto states, "she violated fundamental principles of nursing practice. She administered a controlled substance to a non-patient without physician authorization, outside of any institutional oversight, using medication that was not prescribed for that individual. These are serious breaches of professional standards that could have resulted in serious harm or death." Dr. Yamamoto continues, "If we allow nurses to make independent decisions about medication administration based on their personal judgment, regardless of protocols, we undermine the entire framework of safe medical practice. What happens the next time a nurse decides to administer medication in an emergency but makes an error in judgment? Who bears responsibility for the consequences?" Maya feels the hearing slipping away from her. The board members nod along with Dr. Yamamoto's testimony, clearly convinced by the argument about professional standards and legal liability. Richardson tries to counter with evidence about Maya's excellent employment record and the specific circumstances of the emergency. But the damage is done. During the lunch recess, Richardson pulls Maya aside in the hallway. "This isn't going well," she admits. "The board is more concerned about liability and precedent than they are about the positive outcome. They're worried that supporting your actions would encourage other nurses to take similar risks." Maya's heart sinks. She's known since the hearing began that the board members seemed hostile to her case, but hearing it confirmed by her own lawyer makes it real. What are my options? We can continue with the defense, but honestly, I think they've already made up their minds. The best we might achieve is a temporary suspension rather than permanent license revocation. The afternoon session feels like a formality. Maya testifies on her own behalf, explaining her thought process and her assessment of the patient's critical condition. She describes her 4 years of nursing experience, her dedication to patient care, and her belief that saving a life justifies the risk she took. "Miss Chen," Dr. Henley says during cross-examination, "do you understand that your actions, regardless of their outcome, set a dangerous precedent? If every nurse decided to override medical protocols based on their personal assessment of emergency situations, patient safety would be compromised across the healthcare system." Maya takes a deep breath. "I understand the concern about protocols, but I also understand that sometimes protocols aren't enough. That man was dying, and I had the knowledge and means to save him. I couldn't live with myself if I had watched him die while waiting for permission to help." Dr. Torres leans forward. "But you're not a physician, Miss Chen. You don't have the training or authority to make independent medication decisions, especially with controlled substances like insulin. What if you had been wrong about his condition? What if your intervention had caused harm?" "Then I would take responsibility for that decision," Maya replies. "But I wasn't wrong. My assessment was correct. My intervention was successful, and a man is alive because I acted." The board deliberates for less than 30 minutes, an ominously short time for such a significant decision. When they return, Dr. Henley's expression is grave. "The board finds that Miss Maya Chen violated the Illinois Nursing Practice Act by administering medication outside of established protocols and without proper authorization. While we acknowledge the positive outcome in this specific case, we cannot condone actions that undermine the fundamental structure of safe nursing practice." Maya's stomach drops as she hears the words she's been dreading. "Therefore, the board hereby revokes Miss Chen's nursing license, effective immediately. This decision reflects the serious nature of the violations and serves as a clear message that deviation from professional standards will not be tolerated, regardless of circumstances or outcomes." The gavel falls with a sound that seems to echo through Maya's entire future. 4 years of nursing school, thousands of hours of clinical experience, and a career dedicated to helping children, all erased because she chose to save a life. Richardson squeezes Maya's shoulder, but the gesture feels hollow. Outside the hearing room, reporters wait with cameras and microphones ready to document Maya's professional destruction. The nurse who saved a CEO's life has been deemed unfit to practice nursing. As Maya walks through the gauntlet of media attention, one reporter's question cuts through her shock. "Miss Chen, do you regret your decision to help Mr. Blackstone?" Maya stops and looks directly into the camera. "I regret that we live in a system where saving a life can end a career, but I don't regret saving his life. I'd do it again." The video of her statement will be viewed millions of times over the next 24 hours, but right now, Maya just wants to disappear. She's lost her profession, her identity, and her purpose. The foundation offer from Blackstone feels like a consolation prize, charity from the man whose life she saved at the cost of her own career. That evening, Maya sits in her apartment surrounded by the nursing textbooks and medical journals that defined her professional life. Her glucose monitor reads 134 mg/dl, stable, thanks to the insulin provided by Blackstone's pharmacy card. The irony is bitter. She can afford her medication now, but she's no longer allowed to practice the profession that gave her life meaning. Her phone buzzes with calls from reporters, job recruiters, and patient advocacy groups. But Maya ignores them all. She's been publicly vindicated and professionally destroyed in the same week, leaving her uncertain about everything she thought she knew about healthcare, justice, and the value of doing the right thing. Tomorrow, Blackstone will announce his foundation and offer her a new career path. But tonight, Maya mourns the end of the life she built and the profession she loved, wondering if saving one man's life was worth losing her own purpose and identity. Maya wakes at dawn on Friday morning to the sound of helicopter rotors growing steadily louder. She pulls her pillow over her head, assuming it's a medical helicopter heading to one of Chicago's trauma centers, but the noise doesn't fade into the distance. Instead, it seems to hover directly overhead, the rhythmic beating growing so intense that her apartment windows vibrate in their frames. She stumbles to her kitchen window and looks up, seeing nothing but gray October sky. The sound is deafening now, and she can hear her neighbors opening doors and shouting questions to each other in the hallway. Maya throws on clothes and steps outside, joining the crowd of residents who have gathered in the small courtyard behind her building. What they see defies explanation. A sleek private helicopter, black with gold trim, the kind used by corporate executives and celebrities, hovers about 50 feet above the modest residential neighborhood. But that's not the most shocking part. Attached to the helicopter by steel cables is a small prefabricated building, complete with windows and a front door, being lowered with precision into the tiny backyard of the house next to Maya's apartment complex. "What the hell is happening?" shouts Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop, still wearing her bathrobe and holding a cup of coffee. The structure touches down gently in the grass, and the helicopter cables detach with mechanical precision. As the aircraft rises and moves away, Maya can see the building clearly. It's a complete medical clinic, maybe 400 square feet, with examining rooms, medical equipment visible through the windows, and professional signage that reads Maya Chen Community Health Center. Maya's phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. "Look outside, WB." Before she can process what she's seeing, a convoy of black SUVs turns onto her quiet residential street. The vehicles are clearly government, tinted windows, official license plates, and the kind of serious-looking security personnel that usually accompany high-ranking officials. The convoy stops in front of Maya's building, and men in dark suits begin establishing a security perimeter. From the lead vehicle emerges a figure Maya recognizes from news coverage. Secretary of Health and Human Services, Dr. Maria Santos, followed by several people in medical scrubs and business attire. But the person who makes Maya's heart skip is William Blackstone, walking with purpose toward the crowd of confused neighbors. "Miss Chen," Blackstone calls out, spotting Maya in the crowd. "I hope you don't mind the theatrical arrival. I wanted to make sure we had everyone's attention." Dr. Santos approaches Maya with a warm smile. "Miss Chen, I'm Maria Santos. I've been following your story, and I wanted to personally thank you for highlighting the insulin affordability crisis. Your experience has prompted several congressional hearings and legislative proposals." Maya feels overwhelmed by the surreal scene, federal officials, a helicopter-delivered medical clinic, and media trucks that are now arriving to document whatever is happening in her quiet neighborhood. "I don't understand what's going on." Blackstone gestures toward the prefabricated clinic. "Yesterday, after your nursing license was revoked, I realized that the system failed you twice. First, it made medication unaffordable. Then it punished you for saving a life. So I decided to bring the solution directly to you." Dr. Santos pulls out an official-looking document. "Miss Chen, under emergency federal authority granted by the Public Health Service Act, I'm authorizing you to operate this federally funded community health clinic. Your nursing license revocation applies only to state-regulated healthcare facilities. Federal health services operate under different jurisdiction. Maya stares at the document, her mind struggling to process the legal implications. You're saying I can practice nursing again? More than that, Blackstone adds, this clinic will provide free diabetes care and medication to anyone who needs it. No insurance required, no means testing, no bureaucratic barriers. Just health care for people who can't afford it elsewhere. A woman in scrubs steps forward. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the emergency physician who testified at Maya's hearing. I've volunteered to serve as the clinic's supervising physician. Several other healthcare workers have also committed to volunteer here. We believe in what you did, Maya, and we want to be part of the solution. The crowd of neighbors has grown larger, and Maya notices that many of them are looking at the clinic with hope rather than confusion. Mrs. Patterson approaches hesitantly. Does this mean we could actually afford to see a doctor? She asks. My husband has diabetes, but we can't afford his insulin since his hours got cut. Dr. Santos nods. That's exactly what this means. This clinic will serve as a model for community-based healthcare delivery, focusing on patients who fall through the cracks of our current system. Maya looks around at the scene, federal officials, medical professionals, and neighbors who have lived with untreated conditions because they couldn't afford care. The helicopter-delivered clinic, sitting in her backyard, feels like something from a dream. But the people surrounding her are real, and their medical needs are urgent. There's more, Blackstone says, pulling out another document. The Maya Chen Foundation is officially launching today with $100 million in initial funding. But instead of just providing free medication, we're creating a network of these community clinics in underserved areas across the country. He points to a tablet showing architectural plans. Each clinic will be staffed by healthcare workers who've been marginalized by the current system. Nurses who've lost licenses for compassionate care violations, physicians who've been disciplined for treating uninsured patients, healthcare workers who've been pushed out for advocating for their patients. Dr. Santos adds, the federal government is providing regulatory support and matching funds. This represents a new model for healthcare delivery, one that prioritizes patient care over profit margins and protocol compliance. Maya feels tears building in her eyes as she looks at the clinic, then at the faces of her neighbors, many of whom she knows have been struggling with untreated medical conditions. 2 days ago, she lost her career for saving one life. Now she's being offered the opportunity to save hundreds of lives. Why are you doing this? Maya asks Blackstone. He smiles, and for the first time since she met him, he looks genuinely happy rather than corporate. Because 2 days ago, you showed me what healthcare should look like, immediate, compassionate, focused on human need rather than institutional protocol. You risked everything to save my life. Now, I want to help you save others. As media helicopters circle overhead and reporters arrive to document the extraordinary scene, Maya realizes that her worst professional disaster has become an opportunity to transform healthcare for people just like her, people who have been failed by a system that prioritizes profit over patients. The clinic door opens and Dr. Walsh emerges with a clipboard. We're ready to see patients. Who wants to be first? Mrs. Patterson raises her hand, tears streaming down her face. My husband. Please, can you help my husband? Maya looks at the federal authorization in her hands, then at the clinic that landed in her backyard like a gift from heaven. 24 hours ago, she thought her nursing career was over. Now she has the chance to practice healthcare the way she always believed it should be, with compassion, accessibility, and a focus on healing rather than paperwork. Let's get started, Maya says, walking toward the clinic that will change everything. 6 months later, Maya stands in the main conference room of the Blackstone Foundation headquarters, looking at a wall-sized map of the United States, dotted with green pins representing community health clinics. What started as a single prefabricated building in her backyard has grown into a network of 47 clinics serving underserved communities from rural Mississippi to urban Detroit. The morning briefing includes reports from clinic directors across the country, each sharing success stories and challenges. Dr. Patricia Williams from the clinic in Appalachian, Kentucky, reports that diabetes-related emergency room visits in her region have dropped by 60% since the clinic opened. Maria Rodriguez, a nurse practitioner running the clinic in East Los Angeles, describes how they've helped undocumented immigrants access insulin for the first time in years. The numbers are remarkable, says Dr. Jennifer Walsh, now serving as the Foundation's Chief Medical Officer. We've provided free diabetes care to over 12,000 patients, prevented an estimated 200 hospitalizations, and saved the healthcare system approximately $8 million in emergency care costs. Maya nods, proud of the impact but aware of how much more work remains. Each success story represents a person who might have died or suffered serious complications without access to affordable care. But for every patient they've helped, there are thousands more struggling with the same impossible choices Maya faced. William Blackstone enters the conference room carrying a folder of documents and wearing the expression of someone with significant news to share. Over the past 6 months, he's become more than just the Foundation's primary funder. He's become a genuine advocate for healthcare reform, using his industry connections to push for systemic changes. "I have updates from Washington," Blackstone announces, settling into his chair at the conference table. The Maya Chen Foundation's work has caught the attention of several congressional committees, and there's movement on federal legislation to address insulin pricing. He opens his folder and distributes copies of a bill titled the Affordable Insulin Access Act. Maya scans the document, recognizing language that mirrors the Foundation's mission and approaches they've developed through their clinic network. Representatives Martinez and Thompson have introduced bipartisan legislation that would cap insulin costs at $50 per month for all patients, regardless of insurance status, Blackstone continues. They've specifically cited our clinic model as evidence that community-based diabetes care can be both effective and cost-efficient. Dr. Santos joins the meeting via video conference from her office in Washington. "Maya, I wanted to personally update you on the federal response to your Foundation's work. The Department of Health and Human Services is proposing to fund similar community clinic networks in all 50 states, with an initial appropriation of $500 million. The news is overwhelming. Maya thinks back to that October morning when she gave her last insulin dose to a dying stranger, never imagining that her act of desperation would catalyze national healthcare policy changes. "There's more," Dr. Santos continues. "The President wants to meet with you next week. She's planning to sign an executive order establishing community health clinics as a permanent part of federal healthcare policy, and she'd like you to be present for the signing ceremony." Maya feels the weight of responsibility that comes with unexpected influence. She's gone from being a suspended nurse to being consulted on national healthcare policy, but she knows the real work happens in the clinics with individual patients who need immediate help. "I appreciate the recognition," Maya says, "but I want to make sure we don't lose focus on direct patient care. Policy changes are important, but people are dying right now while we wait for systemic reforms." Blackstone smiles approvingly. "That's exactly why you're the right person to lead this movement. You never forget that healthcare is about individual human beings, not abstract policy discussions." He turns to another section of his folder. "Which brings me to the next development. Blackstone Pharmaceutical is announcing a new pricing structure for insulin. We're reducing the cost to $25 per vial, just above manufacturing cost, and establishing a patient assistance program that will provide free medication to anyone whose family income is below 400% of the federal poverty level." The room falls silent as everyone processes the implications. Maya knows that Blackstone's company produces about 30% of the insulin used in the United States, and other manufacturers will likely be forced to match or compete with these prices. "You're essentially giving up billions in revenue," Maya says. "We're choosing long-term sustainability over short-term profit maximization," Blackstone replies. The Foundation's work has demonstrated that accessible healthcare creates more value than extractive pricing models. When people can afford their medication, they stay healthy, remain productive, and contribute to economic growth rather than consuming expensive emergency services. Dr. Walsh leans forward. What about your shareholders? Pharmaceutical companies have fiduciary obligations to maximize profits. Blackstone's expression becomes serious. I've spent the past 6 months convincing our board that sustainable healthcare markets are more profitable than crisis-driven ones. We've also restructured the company's mission statement to include social responsibility as a core business objective. Maya thinks about the patients she's treated over the past 6 months. People like Tommy Rodriguez's family, who drove 8 hours from rural Illinois to access free diabetes care at her clinic. She remembers Mrs. Patterson's husband, whose blood sugar control improved dramatically once he could afford regular insulin doses. Each success story represents a life saved and a family protected from financial catastrophe. I have a request, Maya says. Instead of the executive order ceremony, I'd like the president to visit one of our clinics. I want her to meet the patients, talk to the healthcare workers, and see how policy changes translate into human impact. Dr. Santos nods approvingly. That's an excellent idea. Which clinic would you recommend? Maya considers the options. The clinic in Detroit. It serves a diverse patient population, demonstrates the challenges of urban healthcare delivery, and has an exceptional team led by Dr. Marcus Thompson, who lost his medical license in Michigan for treating uninsured patients outside of hospital protocols. Blackstone adds, Dr. Thompson's story mirrors yours, Maya. He's another healthcare professional who was punished for prioritizing patient care over administrative compliance. As the meeting concludes, Maya looks again at the map showing their expanding network of clinics. Each green pin represents hope for patients who previously had no options, healthcare workers who found new purpose, and communities that are healthier because accessible care is available. 6 months ago, Maya thought her nursing career was over. Now she's helping to reshape American healthcare policy while directly providing care to thousands of patients. The insulin pen she emptied to save William Blackstone's life has become the catalyst for systemic changes that will save countless other lives. But Maya knows the real measure of success isn't policy victories or media attention. It's the number of people who no longer have to choose between medication and food, between health care and housing, between saving their own lives and saving their families from bankruptcy. The transformation from personal crisis to national movement is remarkable. But Maya's focus remains on the next patient walking through a clinic door, seeking help that should never have been out of reach in the first place. 2 years after Maya Chen gave her last insulin dose to a dying stranger, she stands before a joint session of Congress, invited to address lawmakers about healthcare accessibility and the community clinic model that has transformed diabetes care across America. The House chamber is packed with representatives, senators, and gallery visitors who have come to hear from the nurse whose act of compassion sparked a national healthcare revolution. Maya wears a simple navy blue suit, more expensive than anything she owned when she worked at Chicago General, but still modest compared to the corporate attire of pharmaceutical executives who typically address Congress. Pinned to her lapel is a small silver insulin pen, a reminder of the choice that changed everything. 2 years ago, I was a pediatric nurse who couldn't afford the insulin I needed to survive, Maya begins, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system. I gave my last dose to save a stranger's life, and that decision cost me my nursing license. Today, I'm here to talk about what we've learned from that crisis and how we can ensure no American ever again faces the choice between medication and financial survival. The statistics she presents are remarkable. The Maya Chen Foundation Network has grown to 200 community clinics in all 50 states, providing free diabetes care to over 100,000 patients annually. Emergency room visits for diabetic crises have decreased by 40% in communities with foundation clinics, saving the healthcare system an estimated $200 million in acute care costs. But the most important number isn't financial, Maya continues. It's the 847 lives we've documented as saved through direct intervention. People who would have died from rationing insulin or avoiding medical care due to cost. Each of those lives represents a family that didn't have to plan a funeral, children who still have their parents, and communities that retained valuable members. Representative Sarah Martinez of California, who co-sponsored the Affordable Insulin Access Act, asks Maya to elaborate on the policy changes that have resulted from the Foundation's work. The legislation we've passed together has capped insulin costs at $35 per month for Medicare recipients and established federal funding for community health clinics, Maya explains. But we've also seen changes in corporate behavior. Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' decision to reduce insulin pricing forced competitors to follow suit, creating a market-driven solution alongside regulatory reforms. Maya turns to address the pharmaceutical industry representatives in the gallery. When companies choose sustainable pricing over extractive profit maximization, everyone benefits. Patients can afford their medication, healthcare systems spend less on emergency interventions, and pharmaceutical companies build larger, more stable customer bases. The questioning turns to challenges and limitations. Senator Robert Hayes of Texas, known for his skeptical view of government healthcare spending, asks about the long-term sustainability of the community clinic model. Senator, our clinics are actually profitable when you account for the full cost of healthcare delivery, Maya responds. Preventing diabetic emergencies costs less than treating them. Early intervention is cheaper than crisis management. The Foundation's clinics generate positive returns on investment within 18 months of operation. She pulls up a presentation slide showing comparative costs. It costs approximately $1,200 per year to provide comprehensive diabetes care through our community clinics. The average cost of a single diabetic emergency room visit is $3,800, and hospital stays for diabetic ketoacidosis average $18,000. Prevention is economically superior to crisis response. During the lunch recess, Maya is approached by Dr. Marcus Thompson, the Detroit clinic director who lost his Michigan medical license for treating uninsured patients. He's been working with the Foundation to expand their urban healthcare model and has become a national advocate for healthcare workers' rights. Maya, I wanted to thank you, Dr. Thompson says. 2 years ago, I thought my medical career was over because I chose patients over protocols. Now I'm treating more patients than ever, with federal support and legal protection. Maya smiles, remembering her own despair after the nursing board hearing. The system that punished us for caring has become a system that rewards compassion. It took a crisis to create change, but change is possible. William Blackstone joins them in the corridor outside the House chamber. He looks different than he did 2 years ago, more energetic, more purposeful, as if finding meaning beyond profit margins has rejuvenated him. The afternoon session is going to focus on expanding the model to other chronic conditions, Blackstone tells Maya. Representative Johnson wants to know about applying community clinic approaches to hypertension, heart disease, and mental health services. Maya nods. We've already started pilot programs in 12 locations. The same principles apply: accessible care, community-based delivery, and focus on prevention rather than crisis intervention. As they return to the chamber for the afternoon session, Maya reflects on the journey from that October morning when she used her last insulin dose. She's lost count of the interviews, policy meetings, and congressional hearings, but she's never lost sight of the individual patients who motivated her initial choice. The afternoon questioning focuses on scaling and replication. How can the community clinic model serve rural areas with limited healthcare infrastructure? What modifications are needed for different regional populations? How can the federal government support expansion without creating bureaucratic barriers? Maya answers each question by returning to patient stories. She describes Maria Gonzalez, a farm worker in rural California who drove 200 miles to reach the nearest Foundation clinic. She talks about James Mitchell, a retired auto worker in Detroit whose diabetes complications reversed after 6 months of regular care. Each policy discussion is grounded in human impact. The question isn't whether we can afford to expand community health care, Maya tells the assembled lawmakers. The question is whether we can afford not to. Every diabetic who dies from rationing insulin represents a failure of our healthcare system and our moral commitments as a society. Representative Martinez asks about Maya's personal transformation from nurse to national healthcare advocate. I didn't choose to become an advocate, Maya responds. I chose to save a life, and that choice forced me to confront the systemic problems that made my situation possible. When you see healthcare from both sides, as a provider and as a patient who can't afford treatment, you understand that individual compassion isn't enough. We need structural changes that make compassion unnecessary because care is accessible to everyone. As the hearing concludes, Senator Hayes approaches Maya with a question that has been implicit throughout the day's discussions. Ms. Chen, if you had to do it over again, knowing the professional consequences, the media attention, and the responsibility you've had to shoulder, would you still give that insulin dose to Mr. Blackstone? Maya doesn't hesitate. Senator, that question misses the point. The real question is, why did I have to make that choice in the first place? Why was a working nurse unable to afford the medication she needed to survive? Why did our healthcare system create a situation where saving one life meant risking another? She looks around the chamber, making eye contact with lawmakers from both parties. The goal isn't to create more heroes who sacrifice themselves for strangers. The goal is to create a system where heroism isn't necessary because healthcare is accessible, affordable, and available to everyone who needs it. As applause fills the House chamber, Maya thinks about the patients who will visit foundation clinics today, receiving care that was unimaginable 2 years ago. Her empty insulin pen became the catalyst for systemic change, but that change is measured in individual lives saved, families protected from bankruptcy, and communities made healthier through accessible care. The stranger she saved on a Chicago sidewalk has become a partner in transforming American health care. The career she lost has been replaced by a mission that reaches far beyond any individual hospital ward. And the choice that seemed to cost her everything has given her the opportunity to ensure that future patients never face the same impossible decision. Maya Chen's legacy isn't the foundation that bears her name or the policies that resulted from her advocacy. Her legacy is a healthcare system that finally prioritizes human need over institutional protocol, compassion over profit, and prevention over crisis. A system where no one has to choose between medication and survival, between saving a stranger and saving themselves. In the end, the insulin pen that sat empty in her pocket for 24 terrifying hours became the instrument that filled the gap between healthcare as it was and healthcare as it should be.